Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zach Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Dennis O'Neil, a powerhouse in the worlds of venture capital, blockchain, IPOs, investment banking, and business leadership. As a CEO, board member, and fellow speaker, Dennis brings a wealth of expertise to the table. Let's dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth.
Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with myself, Zach Palmer, the show where we explore strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Dennis O'Neil. He is a venture capitalist and a leading expert in generating revenue for new businesses and an inspiring thought leader. So as we dive into growth and investing and business development, I want to allow our audience to take another step on their journey to perpetual growth. So Dennis, welcome. And I would love to just take a moment and allow you to introduce yourself and let the audience get to know more about you.
Thank you, Zach. My name is Dennis O'Neil. My background is a little bit over 30 years of investment banking experience. I started two of the largest regional investment banks in Chicago, Madison Securities and Advanced Equities. I went on to run the SoftBank Investments E2 Capital out of Chicago as managing director. SoftBank's one of the largest funds in the world. I was also the chief investment officer for a digital investment bank out of Toronto called DigiMax Global. So I've raised a couple of $1 billion in early stage capital. I have personally taken over a dozen companies public onto the US stock exchanges. And I have spoken at over 75 conferences globally throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia. O'Neil Capital Advisors. We're an advisory firm. We have a little bit over 30,000 investors on our platform. The vast majority of them are institutional investors, typically investors that manage anywhere between 50 million and a couple of $1 billion. And we do capital introductions to help companies raise capital. And then if they're inclined to do so, if they're looking to go public or do an IPO, I'm also head of business development for a licensed investment bank called Click Capital Markets out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Click Capital Markets has over 5 million retail investors in 40 countries around the world. We have participated in over 400 IPOs in the past 5.5 years. And we have strategic partnerships with 52 of the largest investment banks in the United States, everywhere from Goldman Sachs, Citibank, all the way down to the smaller regional investment banks. So O'Neil Capital Advisors, we help with the private investments into private companies. And then Click Capital Markets, we help with the IPOs.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really appreciate that introduction, Dennis. You have done a lot. So I mean, a 30-year journey, kicking off. How did you get into investing? I mean, how did you become a venture capitalist? I mean, work with initial IPOs. What took you down this road, this path to begin with? I mean, what was your purpose, your why, the impetus? Give me a little more background, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I was always interested in how you could make money to, buy yourself some financial freedom and freedom to do what you want in this world. Mm-hmm. So I started off as a commodity trader in Chicago. I'm from Chicago. And I did that for a couple of years. And when I realized how stressful that life was, I decided that I was managing other people's money and trading it as a commodity trader. And so from there, I started off as a stockbroker, and I quickly moved into investment banking. I had a gift for being able to articulate stories, a world-class storyteller. And, so I quickly moved into investment banking. And investment banking is that, the whole idea with investment banking was that the big why was that is that, helping small companies grow into something big.
Hmm.
That there is nothing more exciting than taking a company that has a handful of employees and the next thing you know, they have 100.
Hmm.
And it's like watching that growth, watching all these people that are employed go through that, and watching the executives grow into real professionals. Um, that it's an experience that you can't miss. It's really
Yeah.
exciting.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful gift. That resonates really strongly with me as I personally took over a family business when I was 19 years old. I had
Mm,
no formal business schooling, no real mentors, nobody to really guide me along the way. And I learned, unfortunately, a lot of stuff the hard way. And one of the biggest challenges I was presented with at the time was, I took over a company that was only doing $300,000 a year in gross revenue. It was a
mm.
commodity-based company and was over $800,000 in debt. So
Wow.
I had no idea what was ahead of me, but I found a way. And if I had had someone in my court, someone on my side to be able to guide me through some of those challenges, I mean, that would have been such an incredible gift. For you, when you're evaluating a company and organization and helping, trying to determine if they're going to be a good fit, what are some of the criteria that you are looking for in both the person and the company that really, are those green lights that say, yes, I want to work with these guys. It's going to help drive success, and I could really see a long-term sustainable future.
Sure. First and foremost is a high quality management team.
Mhm.
And when that means that they have a track record of success within the industry that they're actually in, not merging from another industry over. More important than that is that are they coachable?
Mhm.
Sometimes you run into this know-it-all-isms where that they know everything and
Mhm.
they expect everything's just going to be like a magic wand, and that
Sure.
everything, as we say, the starry-eyed entrepreneur that expects everything to go perfectly right and it
Mhm.
has a performer to prove it. And then from there, we look for, technologies or business plans that are highly disruptive,
Mhm.
that if they are successful, that they'd be able to capture, significant market share within the sector of the market that they're going after. We look for companies that are participating either in large markets or markets that are growing very, very quickly. Um, we also look for, companies that actually have a finished product. The revenues are starting to ramp up. So we can see that they're getting traction in the market. It's not just a concept, but it's a real business that's starting to gain traction.
Mhm.
And then just from the business side of it, we like to see that they've raised some money previously,
Mhm.
you know, so that we can see that they're able to raise capital, that they're good enough storytellers to be able to do that. And then not only that, but then we can see how they deploy their capital.
Mhm.
Did they go out and buy cars with it, or did they invest it into the business? Did everybody increase their salary immediately, or did everybody, continue to? Did they treat the money like it was their own money, or like it was some cash windfall that they start move into really expensive office spaces or something like that?
Mhm. Office spaces, glamorous trips. I've
Yeah,
seen plenty of those examples where all of a sudden people are taking hella skiing trips and,
yeah.
and
I've had
traveling the
I've
world.
had some horror stories. I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, is there a particular industry or niche that you tend to focus on the most that either resonates with you on the highest level or is just the most burgeoning industry at present, or where do you
Yeah,
find
I
yourself?
mean, I mean, right now, basically we follow the trends of the market. Basically I try to become an expert in a new market about every 5 years.
Hmm.
So we have anything to do with technology,
Hmm.
AI right now is super hot. So
Yeah.
that's a really, we're laser focused on that. Anything to do with sustainability, that's a really good industry for us. Blockchain, we love blockchain, cryptocurrencies.
Hmm.
I've spoken at 20 conferences on blockchain and cryptocurrencies and things of that sort. We love healthcare, anything to do
Hmm.
with healthcare, which covers a large sector of the market. But, We are pretty much industry agnostic. I mean, we've been around for so long. We have experts in every sector of the market that we can lean on to validate business plans and technology and things of that sort. So we're really opportunistic as far as, where we're willing to play.
Hmm.
But first and foremost is that, we need to have a good management team that we get along with
Hmm.
and that we like and we trust
Yeah.
because we're going to be spending a lot of time together.
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely crucial. I mean, I found that time and again as a business consultant. I mean, if you're not working with, if there isn't that synergy between the two organizations, it doesn't matter how dynamic your skill set is. If you cannot communicate effectively and have somebody follow through and execute those plans, then it's all for naught regardless. So that synergy is absolutely important. And you read my mind. I mean, of course, AI was one of the first things I was wondering if you were pursuing. And then as I have a pretty significant background in health and wellness, that's something that resonates with me on a high level as well. They're all fantastic industries that are going through exponential changes and growth. I mean, the new technologies that are coming out on every front are just mind blowing. I mean, what we will see over the next 10, 20, 30 years, I think is nothing short of awe-inspiring. Now, what I would love to know a little bit more about too is your journey.
Mm.
You're a 30-year industry veteran, which is uncommon in today's world, particularly with the
Mm.
millennials having that tendency to bounce from one thing to the next. So I love an expert, but I also love to hear more about those stories, those major turning points, the chapters that, be it the obstacles or challenges that you had to overcome, or maybe it was just some of those phenomenal breakthroughs, a little bit of luck that came your way that led to that success. Are there any stories or major turning points that come to mind that you'd be willing to share with the audience that would help them, potentially with their growth and development in business and investing overall?
Sure. I think just like when you're starting any new industry, you're kind of a deer in the headlights going, oh my God, well, you're so worried about what you don't know.
Yeah.
And there's only one cure for it, and that's experience. And a
Yeah.
lot of that experience you have to take it the hard way because there's no easy way to do it except to make a lot of mistakes and the only way that you learn is by doing it. So I was a big believer in massive action.
Mhm.
Just take massive action at all points in time. And that, I read all the books and every single type of motivational investment banking, any of the leaders within the industry,
Mhm.
stayed up, on all the news, to be up to date on it. But there were specific things that really weren't taught to anybody as an investment banker. And basically, it's like, how you actually handicap a company, basically how you look at them. I mean, there's data points. And when you're looking at early stage companies, every single one of them are low revenues, losing money, and they're going to be $1 billion in revenue in 5 years.
Right.
It's,
Right.
it's some type of ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
And so then you have to dig in and and see how real everything is.
Hmm.
So and a lot of that takes industry expertise.
Hmm.
So you really have to become an expert within the industry that you're operating in. And in the early stages, in the early days, there was a number of projects that we raised a lot of money for. Things were going amazingly well. And then you realize that the management team was in over their head, that the Peter rule kicked in to where
Hmm.
there was no more growth left for these guys. They were drowning,
Hmm.
drowning in success, but still drowning.
Hmm.
So what I think is probably critically important for anybody that's going to be doing what I'm doing or in the sector of the markets in that I'm doing is that you have to be able to read people really, really well.
Hmm.
And you got to know when people are less than honest. and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you have to be able to you have to figure that out before that you commit to doing a financing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times that when we would go into this, we would create high stress situations to see how that they would respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we would disagree with one of the premises of the investment thesis that they were putting forward, or challenge their technology, or really, really, really go after them in a very strong way, or to see how they would respond. See if they would do that, if they would respond um, in a very reasonable fashion,
Sure.
breaking down the problem, answering the questions, summing up, or would they get super emotional,
Mm-hmm.
loud, aggressive, negative, and things of that sort. So that was one of the tests that we learned on the early start, is that you need to test to see how they do under stress.
That's absolutely brilliant. I mean, in so many contexts. I mean, it makes me reflect back, 20 plus years ago when I got my start in business, I was a terrible leader. I mean, and I have no problem saying it. I was young, I was egotistical, and I did what I knew, which was more of the traditional top-down authoritarian type model. Thankfully, I grew, I involved in, like you, I've continued to invest in personal development and really I've adopted that mentality, model the best and forget the rest.
Mhm.
And I think that has really contributed in a really powerful way. But what you have made a conscious decision to do in terms of testing the leadership teams is so simple, but so brilliant. I mean, can you think of a specific, was there a moment when you had this epiphany and you went, wow, this is something that we need to integrate as a consistent practice? And what happened after that?
Well, what happened was that we would get to the point to where that, are we really going to put all the chips on the table and really back these people? And
Hmm.
after doing some financings, to where that the people were the nicest people in the world.
Hmm.
And when we were working with them, they were the nicest people that I've ever worked with. And then the second they got the money, they turned and they were like, "Why are you still calling me?" It's like, and they turned and they were just Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh my God, there's got to be a way to try to figure out, is there another side to these people before that we commit major time, effort,
Hmm.
credibility, our investors' capital, or
Hmm.
the people that we're connected to."
Hmm.
So I decided that, especially when some of these are really close calls, as far as that if you're going to do something or not,
Hmm.
because if you believed every single person, uh, every company and what they said, you would invest in every single one of them.
Hmm. Yep.
I
Oh,
mean,
for sure.
because nobody has a bad pro forma. For the most part, everybody has a decent pitch that has a compelling reason why that you're going to make gobs of money by investing into their company. But so I was like, well, what we really need to do is we really need to create these high stress situations to figure out how they respond, and to see if there is another side to this,
Hmm. Hmm.
and really drill down hard on the high stress side, so that we can see if there is if how they do under stress.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and especially when people don't agree with them, because some investors won't agree with them.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I need to see how they respond to that as well. I can't have them going super negative on one of our capital introductions,
Hmm.
which happened in the past. But so we figured that this would be the best way. I mean, we could challenge them on evaluation, their technology, their sales projections,
Yeah.
basically how they're going to ramp. There's a multitude of different ways, and sometimes you do multiple sides. So, but then when you see the response back, um, the people that would get really crappy, we'd be
Hmm.
like, "You're not the kind of people we want to do business with."
Hmm.
I mean, because if they're really good, they're going to be true to their convictions,
Hmm.
and they're going to be, well, you're just not a good match for us.
Hmm. Yeah, it's one thing to see, values, beliefs, mission, vision, everything identified on a
Exactly.
piece of paper, but it's a whole nother thing to witness how they execute that in first person communications, and particularly when they're put in a difficult spot. I mean, it's such a beautiful and mindful approach because on one hand, numbers don't lie. I mean, they tell a very clear and compelling story. But on the other hand, there is always the human element. And
Yeah.
the human element can be dramatically affected by emotion and whether it's changes in the economy, whether it's something that's going on interpersonal relationship at home, it can be any confluence of things. So your willingness to really test and ensure that you're protecting your investors and inviting the best businesses in is a really brilliant model. And I love the education aspect too. One thing that was became something really important for me, or at least I realized the hard way, was as I was building my business when I was much younger, I kept trying to hire other experts to take on the tasks that I didn't know how to
Mhm.
perform well. And what happened time and again is I'd hire these other experts that pitched a really great story and had phenomenal presentations, but rarely executed or delivered the results that they promised. And what I found for me became increasingly important, like you study and dedicate time to each of these industries. I learned that I had to become an expert in each of those particular areas, and whether that was leadership, marketing, sales aptitude, your ability to read your financials and determine what
Mhm.
story those numbers are trying to tell you. Until I became an expert myself, there was no way that I was actually going to be able to effectively hire other experts and then be able to hold them accountable to execute on those things. So, as that pertains to your team, I have to imagine that you have a variety of experts, be it on the investing boards or within your organization, to be able to analyze each of these facets in a company. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the fatal flaws in early stage companies is hiring an expert that worked for a big company
Interesting.
because they have an incredible resume or
Hmm.
CV, and then they're used to working with massive resources. They're working with massive budgets. They actually have um, a staff of people that they're actually working with.
Hmm.
So, and then they get thrown into the early stage company, and the early stage company is, oh my God, you have to do everything on your own.
Yeah.
So that is a big difference. I mean, the one thing I will always tell somebody is that it's one thing for them to be an advisor or to lean on their connections,
Hmm.
to do introductions and things of that sort.
Hmm.
But one of the worst things you can do is hire somebody from a big company to come in to run a small company or to become an expert for a small company because they're like a fish out of water,
Hmm.
and they typically cost a lot of money.
Right.
So
That's wise. That makes complete sense.
yeah, so when we're looking at experts, we're looking at experts not only for industry but stage of development.
Mm-hmm.
People that have done it from the earlier stages
Hmm.
because that's a whole different arena to
Yep.
be able to participate. I mean, to be able to compete in.
Yeah, that's again very wise. I mean, somebody positioned that to me not too long ago, actually. You typically have experts that are really great in the early stages of business, getting the business off of the ground, developing and utilizing the marketing resources they have available to gain the exposure, develop the products. And then you've got that midpoint where now you've got consistent revenue. It's not as challenging, but you've got to put on a different hat to reach that next level. I like to say new level, new devil. And then you've got companies, organizations that are really great, or individuals that are really great at making it big, scaling it
Hmm.
and taking it to a national or international audience. And what you said holds very, very true, because if you haven't had that experience or you've been on one side of the coin for so long, it is going to create significant challenges. So when you've got a company that is at one of those earlier stages or maybe at that midpoint, are there any tips or strategies or suggestions that you might offer a leader that's going to help them to be able to start putting or positioning their company so it's set up and getting ready for venture capital or IPO or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, obviously your team is first and foremost. So
Mm-hmm.
basically you want to populate your team with people that are, strong within the industry, that have a track record of success within that sector of the market, which is critically important because at the end of the day, all of this as an early stage company, it's all execution risk. Once you bite off on the idea that this is the right technology or business plan in the right sector of the market at the right time, and the valuation is reasonable, then it becomes, all execution risk. I mean, can the
Mm-hmm.
can the management team actually execute and deliver results in a timely fashion?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, you know, so the team that you build around you, I mean, basically when the funding sources are going to be looking at you and be really scrutinizing how people present, how that they plan, how that, what type of, it's one thing to put together a pro forma that shows that you're going to hockey stick the revenues. And
Mm-hmm.
then when they start drilling down on those numbers and how'd you get there?
Mm-hmm.
What are the costs involved? It's never, I mean, it's you really have to have well thought out business plans, and
Mm-hmm.
it has to have a lot of different data points below the numbers that you put out there
Mm-hmm.
so that they know that it's been super well thought out. And, most of it's going to be 90% of the companies have to pivot anyways away from whatever that they put out there, but at least that they know that your plan, you can strategically plan, and then if you can strategically plan in detail, you can pivot as well in detail,
Mm-hmm.
opposed
Interesting.
to and instead of trying to make it up as you go along.
Hmm. So I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard from you is kind of four key elements. There's presentation, there's planning, there's the actual execution, and
Mhm.
then also adaptability. Their ability to pivot and make the appropriate changes relative to market conditions. Because it's like we can have the best idea in the world, but we really have to let the market determine what they want, and we have to be able to provide those tools, resources, and outcomes at the highest level. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I would say that 90% of all the successful companies that I have been a part of
Hmm.
had to pivot significantly at some stage,
Hmm.
and they had to do it early opposed to too late.
Hmm.
And that's critically important.
Hmm. Excellent. That's fantastic. Well, Dennis, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. Before I wrap up, are there any, last tips or insights or strategies that you may want to offer the audience as to, where want to get started? In a moment, I'll invite you to share your information. I'd love to be able to provide you with that opportunity. But before we get there, is there anything that comes to mind that is a next step that will be really beneficial for most people to take?
Well, for any of the company, I mean, basically we look at this from two aspects. One is that we look for high quality companies that are looking for financing
Hmm.
that we can, do some advisory work with.
Hmm.
And for those companies, obviously you have to be prepared. You
Hmm.
have to be prepared. You have to have a really good corporate presentation. You have to have a good data room, which means
Hmm.
all the documentations that back up all the activities that you've been involved in, contracts and whatnot, so that it's easy to access for the investors. Um, you need good comparables so that you can get a fair valuation in the marketplace. Um, but it's basic. I mean, all that is pretty basic things that
Hmm.
people that are necessary for people to do.
Hmm.
For the investor side, typically we just target most of the very sophisticated investors, and they're usually pretty niche investors, so that they are, most of them are experts within the sectors of the markets that they invest in.
Hmm.
So, typically if we bring an investor, we do a capital introduction to a company. Not only are you going to, possibly end up with an investor, but you're going to end up somebody that has vast knowledge within that sector of the market.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have most likely other companies or connections that they can bring value add, connections to the investment. So it won't be just dead money. It just won't be just regular money. It'll be, investment plus, connections and know-how and deep insight and things of that sort.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like the one additional strategy that I've heard from you, that's probably not, well, may or may not be practiced consistently, but once they've got all the information together, once they have the industry identified, the product created, all the data sets, it sounds like a really good practice could be putting themselves in uncomfortable environments, whether it's bringing an outside tool resource company, expert to ask them the hard questions.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and
Well,
really start planning.
or somebody like myself can put them through it.
Yes, absolutely. That's perfect. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, again, Dennis, thank you for spending your time with us on the
Well, thank
Perpetual
you.
Growth Podcast today. Big shout out to yourself, Dennis O'Neil, for bringing so much value to today's conversation. Dennis, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about you and what you're working on currently?
Sure. You can reach me at o'neillcapitaladvisors.com, which is ONEILL. That's and then the word capital and then advisors, ADVISORS.com. Or you can reach me at o'neillcapital@gmail.com, ONEILL, the word capital @gmail.com. And if you have any questions or if you're just curious about the market or you'd like to get, bounce something off somebody that's an expert within the industry, I'd be happy to help.
Fantastic. Well, if this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Make sure you share it, subscribe, and leave a review to help us reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. So we'll see y'all next time. And again, thanks again, Dennis. It was an absolute pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you so much, Zach. Have a good one.